If I could get myself together, that'd be great. We are at the end of our Ruby Red trilogy by Kirsten Gier, and today's book is Emerald Green. If you've seen the other reviews, you know I really enjoy this series. I think Emerald Green is probably my favorite because it does the most. I feel like it's the clearest finished product, and it's probably because it's the last of the finished product. It is the one that has to tie everything together. Naturally, I do have some issues with it because there are elements within the trilogy that I don't think get finalized, but whatever. And I wore my green. I was like, I don't necessarily have any emeralds, but I like this. So that's what we're going with. I think I might have gotten a little ahead of myself in Sapphire Blue, and that's the problem. As much as I love this trilogy and I enjoy how seamlessly they flow together, that is the problem in reading them one after the other and not giving myself time to review it before I start the next one, is I just forget what happened where. If you have not seen my other reviews, come on guys, go and watch my other reviews. I'm not gonna go over everything. So what I will say is Gwen, who is the main character, she is under the impression that her parents are her parents. In Sapphire Blue, actually technically in Ruby Red, we learn they're not. It is actually this couple named Paul and Lucy. Paul and Lucy are the ones who created the problems because this whole thing is about time traveling, and they stole the time traveling machine, a chronograph. And so we see Paul getting into a duel with another character named Lord Alistair. Earlier in Sapphire Blue, we saw Gideon come back injured, and we don't know why. So now we know why. It's because Paul had been double-crossed by Lord Alistair, and then Gideon shows up and saves his life. Well, that is the epilogue of the book. The final chapter of the book shows Gwen learning that these feelings that Gideon has been expressing to her of love are a farce. He is just using her for the furtherment of their mission. There's this secret of the chronograph where if every single time traveler feeds their blood into it, it unlocks some magical healing power, something that can save humanity. Since Paul and Lucy had stolen the original chronograph, Gideon's responsibility is to get blood for the second chronograph. And then, once Gwen learns she's the time traveler as well, she will join him on that quest. And so we learn that all the things he's saying are just to get her to do what he wants, because in the antiquated notions of men, women will do anything for love. So we end with Gwen completely heartbroken, but not only this, but she has learned the location of the original chronograph, because when Paul and Lucy took it, it meant that they could never return to their original time. However, they left it somewhere, and now Gwen has been able to figure out where that is. Picking up in Emerald Green, back with Paul and Lucy, and Paul is getting his wounds tended to, and they're debating if he did the right thing, because he had been double-crossed. Because Lord Alistair, there are two main villains in this trilogy. There's Lord Alistair, and then we learn there's Count Saint-Germain. I cannot say his name. Count Saint-Germain. And he is the reason that Lucy and Paul took the chronograph, because they realized he had nefarious purposes up his sleeve. He did not want to cure the world of whatever ailment this mystical object within the chronograph would do. He wanted it for himself. Paul had sort of teamed up with Lord Alistair, and he told Lord Alistair, if you give me these secret documents of Count Saint-Germain so that we really know, because he's left documents for all the future time travelers. He's kind of the father of time traveling, even though he's sort of middle in line, which that's one thing that I had an issue with, is I didn't quite understand why he had so much power, except that he did figure things out, although, yeah, there's just a lot I don't understand. But anyways, but he didn't leave all of his papers. He only left the good stuff, right? The things that made him look good. And so Paul wanted to get the bad stuff, damning stuff from Lord Alistair. And in return, Lord Alistair wanted the lineage of the time travelers, because we get this background information. Because they're interspersed within each book, there are records and logs and things like that. And so we learn through these little writings that he had a daughter in a convent. Somehow she got pregnant. People think it was by the devil. It turns out it's a time traveler. But Lord Alistair, actually it's not his daughter. It is, I think, someone in his lineage, someone previous to him. And so he kind of picks up this mantle in the guy's death. But this girl, is impregnated by this demon time traveler who I think turns out to be Count Saint-Germain. I'm not quite sure. What he wants to do is cut out the time traveler line because he thinks they're demons. He thinks they're spawn of Satan. And so then he's like, well, Paul, you're a time traveler, so that means I need to get rid of you too. So that's how it happens. So we see Lucy and Paul debating, because when Gideon showed up and rescued Paul, Paul gave him the documents. And so now Paul and Lucy are wondering if that was the right thing to do. Actually, it's more like Lucy is wondering if it was the right thing to do, whereas Paul is like, I know it's the right thing to do because he said he loved Gwen. However, that completely contradicts what Gideon had told her at the end of Sapphire Blue. So we do start off with this great tension, this really big question as to, what does Gideon feel? Is he lying? Is he telling the truth? Like, who is a good guy here? Who is a bad guy here? Are we gonna learn the truth about Count Saint-Germain? I'm never gonna get it right, but whatever. And so then the rest of the book follows in that vein of what's going on between Gwen and Gideon, what mysteries or truths are they gonna uncover. A big spoiler, each time traveler is associated, I think, with a tree, a gem, and an animal. Gwen's animal is the raven, and she has what is known as the magic of the raven. We don't really know what the magic of the raven is. However, in the legend of the time travelers, it says something about the raven, like she's gonna be a big deal. And through I think it's either through the legend or through the papers, I think it's actually through the papers, we learn that her birth will be his downfall. So we see that he is gonna want to kill her. So the big spoiler is, there had been a mystery about a certain member of their organization who was a Judas, who had betrayed them. Yet we don't know who it is. And we also know at that time, Lord Alistair is going to try and kill Gwen, kill Gideon, kill them both, something along those lines. We get into this situation where we're supposed to learn who the betrayer is, and things don't go the way they're supposed to go, and then Gwen ends up getting killed. We don't really know what's going on. We realize, yes, she's died, and Gideon is crying over her body, and he tells her he loves her, so we're like, what? And then all of a sudden they're back in the present and she's alive. And we realize the magic of the raven is she can't die. Another spoiler is she can die if she kills herself for love. And so this is why Gideon tried to make her believe that he didn't love her, because he didn't want her to give up her life for him. So yeah, he does love her, he doesn't love her. And that's a problem for me, only because I can't stand teenage love. I know so many of you are going to disagree with me, but I just think it's implausible. They're so young, and so great, I'm with it. Like, I can see deep feelings, but love, I have a really hard time buying. This series takes place within the confines of like 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, okay? So Ruby Red finishes at the end of, I think, a couple days, and they're already kissing. And then Sapphire Blue picks up, and then this is when he tells her he loves her, and that's like 2 weeks in. Granted, their time travel does make things seem longer, prolonged, if you will, and they are spending a lot of time. They're doing a lot of things that require trust, but still, it's a 2-week time period. I enjoyed in Sapphire Blue when all of a sudden we think all of the things he's telling her are just to get what he wants, because I'm like, I can get behind that. I can get behind, as much as we loathe this kind of a person, I can get behind a guy who's like, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear so I can get my way. Especially because I was thinking, how can you guys really already be in love? Like when he tells her he loves her and she realizes she loves him back, I'm like, shoot me in the head. This is ridiculous. So I really liked how that rabbit got pulled out of the hat, how we just got this sudden shift of, I was using you. And then when we come back to Emerald Green, and he says, I really do love you. I wasn't using you. It was just to save your life. Anyways, we continue on with the book, and it's all about how to defeat Count Saint-Germain, because and this is something else I don't understand. So Gwen and Gideon and their little band of merry men are kind of going back and forth, trying to figure out who, because they realize that Count Saint-Germain has a spy in their ranks, and they're trying to figure out who it could be. And someone suggests maybe it's Count Saint-Germain himself. If he had been working on creating the Sorcerer's Stone in his own time, then who's to say he didn't somehow already get it? Or who's to say he didn't already get a chronograph that was completed with all the time traveler's blood? And so that's something I don't know how they leapt to that conclusion, to either the conclusion that Count Saint-Germain is still with them, as well as how he could have gotten his hands on a chronograph. I mean, time travel in these novels is really fluid. So it's not that I don't believe he could have gotten his hands on it. I just don't see how. I don't know at what point in their time traveling journey Lucy and Paul realized the truth behind Count Saint-Germain. Like, how long had they been time traveling before they realized he's not a good guy? That was a question for me. I was like, so why did they decide they didn't trust him? And it came because they fall in love, and they decide to start having organized time traveling missions. And on one of these events, they see Count Saint-Germain killing his ancestor. So, obviously Count Saint-Germain had also traveled back in time. So yeah, they realize not a good dude. It's all kind of confusing for me. As much as I love the novel, I do think, and as much as I love the audiobook, because I've listened to it on audiobook both times, it is something that I feel like I need to read so I can kind of pay attention better, or my mind won't be somewhere else. In any case, let me move on, right? Yeah, so this is the deal now, is Gwen and Gideon and their guys are like, oh, he's still among us. So who is he? Gwen comes back from a time traveling thing or another, and she is met with her teacher, Mr. Whitman, who we have known from the beginning is involved, and she realizes that he is actually Count Saint-Germain. It's explained he doesn't have to time travel because his physical body, his original lifespan, had already been up, which again, I don't understand. If he takes the Sorcerer's Stone, if he applies that, in this story, we all know Harry Potter, it's a stone. In this story, it's like granules, and so I guess whenever he dissolves it and drinks it and does whatever with it, is that automatically ending his life or his original lifespan? So anywho, so she wakes up and she hears him. Isn't this just great with any detective novel or crime show where the bad guy has to reveal his full plan? So he has knocked out their doctor and he is telling this unconscious doctor his plan. And then she reveals, oh, I'm actually not dead. And so then he is attempting to get her to kill herself because, as I said, that's the only way she can die, is if she kills herself for love. So he says, I'm going to kill Gideon. I'm going to kill every single member of your family. Like, you need to die. Gideon shows up. Mr. Whitman / Count Saint Germain shoots him. And we're like, oh no. And wouldn't you know it, he took the elixir. He took the other batch of Sorcerer's Stone. And so now they're both immortal. And Mr. Whitman, I have no idea if he actually dies. I should remember. I don't. But I do know Gideon, you know, he gets shot, but he doesn't die. And then Mr. Whitman, distracted by that, gets hit over the head with the butt of a pistol by the doctor who, you know, had regained consciousness just long enough to do that. And then there we go. From the very beginning, we know Gwen can see ghosts. This is something that I think is great because in my mind, it is foreshadowing that she is the Raven. It's foreshadowing of the powers of the Raven, because the power of the Raven is that they kind of walk that line between life and death. And since we learned that she can't die, obviously it has a lot to do with life and death. So then with that, my problem is there's a character named Robert. I just told you about his dad, the doctor, Dr. White. Robert is, I think, 6-ish years old, and he had died because he drowned. And so ever since then, it's been like 20 years, he has followed his dad around. And I could not figure out what the purpose of Robert was. Except, here's another instance that Gwen can see a ghost. There is another ghost in this story called James, he haunts Gwen's school. Or maybe not haunt is the right word, but he hangs around Gwen's school because it is his old family home. He has a decent purpose because in the end, she actually saves him. He had died from smallpox. And actually, I think this is kind of funny. And so what she does is, upon learning that some of the events she will be attending in the past take place at his home, she orchestrates this plan to save his life. I really don't understand how he believed her, because she told him to get him to where she wanted him to be. She said she had information about his horse, like his horse was in danger. I guess because he is painted as pretty vain, I guess that was enough for him to meet her. So she shows up with a smallpox vaccination and injects him with it, so he ends up living. So in the end, like him, I could kind of see how he's this common thread. I thought he could have been bigger because when she learns she's a time traveler, she's vastly underprepared. Charlotte has spent years learning etiquette, learning how to fight, learning history. And so when it becomes evident that it's actually Gwen who's gonna need all that information, I thought, all right, and obviously Gwen did too because she tries this, I thought that James would be the one to teach her what she needs to know. The series takes place in such a short amount of time, it is infeasible for her to learn anything that she really needs to know. And she recognizes that too, so that ends pretty quickly. So I did think that he was underutilized. I did like that she did save him in the end. I thought that was sweet. But Robert, he's cute, but she doesn't even use her connection to him to tell Dr. White that he's okay. that he loves his dad, that he's sorry for the fight that they had before he died. In the end, honestly, like, Robert, nothing. Like, there was no purpose to him. And so I was just, that was just another instance in which I was like, it's cool that it's here. I don't understand why it's here. And another of those is Charlotte. And this is something I've complained about with each book. And I thought, because this is the second time I've read this series, so I couldn't quite remember what kind of resolution we get with her. But Charlotte, her mother, and their grandmother all treat Gwen like a second-class citizen. I don't know why. Apparently, having the time-traveling gene is what makes someone special. So yes, Charlotte was treated like the special one their entire lives because they all live in the same house. However, once Gwen is the one to be revealed to have the time-traveling gene, she's still treated like a second-class citizen, even though it wasn't her fault. Her mother, as in her great aunt, who is the one who's raised her, and Lucy had decided that for some reason lying about Gwen's birth was going to save her from having the time travel gene. So it's their fault that Gwen was underprepared, not Gwen's. Yet everybody in her family still treats her like she doesn't matter, like she's done everything wrong. It's obvious that Charlotte is in love with Gideon. And that was a point of contention because Gwen is falling in love with Gideon and she's like, well, he likes Charlotte, blah, blah, blah. So I just kept thinking, oh, it's obvious Charlotte's just jealous. But sometimes obvious isn't enough. And so I would have wanted development behind Charlotte. And we never get development of Charlotte. The only thing we get is there's this party. And this is after Gwen and Gideon have established themselves as a couple. And so they get to this party, which normally Cynthia's parties are pretty dull. And I guess because they're always pretty dull, and that more than one attendee decided to spike the punch. And everybody's wasted. And Charlotte is up on a table singing, and then she sees Gwen and Gideon, and she goes off on this tangent revealing the secret of time travel and how Gwen gets the man and she doesn't. And that is it. That is all we get into Charlotte's mind. So there's another point of Charlotte I'm going to get to in just a second, but I want to talk about this party before I forget. So Cynthia's parents are also at this party. Have they never tasted alcohol before? If this punch, if it's like 90% vodka and absinthe or something, does nobody realize it doesn't taste like the normal punch that Cynthia serves at her parties? Do her parents not realize before they get drunk that this punch needs to be thrown out? And so my thought is with her parents, if they realize how spiked this punch is, granted this all takes place in England, so maybe they have different thoughts on it, but wouldn't they be like, okay, we gotta throw this punch out because we don't want these kids to be drinking it? Like, if they are not proponents of fun parties, they're probably not gonna be proponents of kids getting drunk at their parties, yet they're there completely wasted. Everybody else except for Leslie, Gwen's best friend, is absolutely wasted. And so I was like, I don't, and Charlotte, if she's so prim and proper, even if she doesn't realize what she's tasting is alcohol, I would think that it is something that is not good. Like, if she thinks it tastes bad, she's not someone that I could foresee finishing it and then having another glass. Because the only way I can see her having another glass is if she's already wasted. So she's like, I'm just gonna have more. But I'm not seeing that. Like, so I thought that whole aspect and this whole party in general was a letdown. But more about Charlotte. So when we realize that the chronograph is hidden in their house, because the thing is, Gwen's grandfather Lucas, or technically her great-grandfather, he is the one who enabled Paul and Lucy to go on their time-traveling romps. So they leave the chronograph with him, which is what he's the person who hides it. And we learn, spoiler, that Count Saint-Germain killed him too because he knew too much. But when Gwen finds the chronograph, her brother helps her, as does their butler, and then they're unable to prevent their great aunt Maddie from finding out because she recognizes the box that it's hidden in. So there's a number of people in the family who know that Gwen has something. Somehow, Charlotte jumps to the conclusion that Gwen has the chronograph. And I'm like, I really don't understand this whole jumping to conclusions thing. Just because Gwen has a box that she doesn't want you to look in because you don't get along doesn't mean that she has the long lost chronograph. She could have anything she doesn't want you to see. Why do you think it's the chronograph? In any case, she is able to convince her mother and her grandmother that they need to go to the lodge to get all the other people from the secret society to barge into Gwen's room, commandeer this chest, which had been hidden in a secret compartment behind a dresser, behind like an armoire, inside of a stuffed alligator, which somehow Charlotte was able to find. I mean, the girl was determined. And this is something else that I really couldn't stand in going along with this whole Charlotte can do whatever she wants. So when Charlotte convinces herself that Gwen has the chronograph, and Gwen will not let her see what's in the box, she says, I don't feel very well. I want to stay home. So her mother and Lady Arista say, oh, you dear poor soul, yes. Gwen, who has been running on high octane for like 2 or 3 weeks, very little sleep, when she says the same thing because she knows what Charlotte's gonna do, they say, no, you have to go to school. You know, my thought is whether one girl or another is lying. If Charlotte says she doesn't feel well, she lives in the same house as Gwen. They go to the same school. They walk together. They ride in the same cars. They take the same bus. Why is it so impossible to think that Gwen could also not be feeling well? In any case, so Charlotte is prevented from going into Gwen's room because Great Aunt Maddie makes excuses for being there. And then afterward, Gwen's sister and brother find reasons to be there. However, obviously, Charlotte and company storm the castle and they get the chest, only for it to have nothing in it because Gwen had foresight. Thank you, Gwen, for being smart. Lady Arista, so this is a point that I like, where Lady Arista realizes the error of her ways. She apologizes to Gwen for not believing her. However, I think it's Glenda is Charlotte's mother's name. She refuses to let it go. And finally, Lady Arista goes, because they're at dinner, and she's like, if you can't stop bringing it up, you can leave. But I was like, I don't understand. I mean, that was the only action taken against Charlotte and Glenda, was Lady Arista apologizing and then telling Glenda, drop it. I do have a question about the magic of the raven, because my impression of the Sorcerer's Stone is that now Gideon is immortal. He cannot die. I'm assuming he can still age. Is that the same as the magic of the raven? Because my initial thought was Gwen will have a natural lifespan and then she will die. But she cannot die before that. You know, she still ages and grows like a normal person, but she will die. But now that Gideon has taken the Sorcerer's Stone elixir, it's intimated that they're going to live happily ever after and never die. And that reminds me, the biggest secret, my favorite secret from this trilogy, we are given constant mentions of Mr. Bernard, or Bernard. I can't remember how they pronounce it. Mr. Bernard, all right? In English, American English, Mr. Bernard. And he is just this mysterious figure who is their butler, who can show up in the blink of an eye, who is always prepared, who can do anything. We learn at the end in the prologue that Lucy and Paul go by the last name of Bernard, and they are talking about how Lucy is pregnant again, and what is Gwen gonna think to know that she's gonna be a big sister, but all of her siblings are gonna precede her and they could actually be dead by the time she's born? Isn't that kind of crazy? I love it. But so yes, we learn that Mr. Bernard or Mr. Bernard is her descendant of some sort. Like, he is an ancestor of her parents. So I thought that was clever. I don't remember if I caught on during my first read, but it was one of those things where he is such a minor character, but there's such a big deal made out of him that you kind of expect something to come from him. And I greatly enjoyed that this was the twist. And that reminds me, there is a character named Marley. Most of the people in this club, this society, don't like Gwen for the same reason that Lady Arista and Charlotte and Glenda don't like Gwen, because she hid the fact that she was the 12th time traveler. We know my feelings on that. And so they're not, like, she is not allowed to know where she's going. People don't tell her anything. They're not nice to her. And Marley is the same way. So I'm thinking, when we are contemplating who the inside man is, I'm thinking it's Mr. Marley. Like, not that he's a bad guy, not that he's a mean guy, he's just not friendly. I kept thinking we were gonna get more of him. We are gonna understand why he behaves the way he does towards Gwen. And in the end, we don't get anything. We see that he doesn't live up to the family name because he's not as ruthless as his predecessors. But he's just rude because he's rude. Because he thinks Count Saint-Germain is the bee's knees and Gwen is not. That reminds me, I know I keep getting reminded, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because I know you're probably like, let's move on and finish here. And I'm sorry if I keep messing with my bangs. They are getting a little long. The whole traitor scenario back in Count Saint-Germain's time when Gwen dies. We learn that it is the first secretary of the lodge. So this guy named Alcott has teamed up with Lord Alistair to wipe out the time traveling line. And I was really underwhelmed because they made this big deal out of it, only for it to only matter within 2 chapters of the entire trilogy. And I was like, how does this have an effect on anything else in the book? It doesn't. So yeah, there were a lot of things that I thought were set up that weren't resolved properly. And then there were a lot of things that should have been developed more that were not. The final thing I want to talk about is Gwen's parentage, because we already knew in Ruby Red, we open with Paul and Lucy having given up a child. We close with them having just met Gwen for the first time, and Lucy is saying she looks just like you. And so we know that they are her parents. She does not. She learns in Emerald Green they are her parents. And so she has yes, this meltdown, an understandable meltdown of what happened to my life. Everything I thought I knew, I don't. So I liked this. I liked that she did get to find out. I liked that she had a natural reaction. However, Paul is a de Villiers. Gideon is a de Villiers. So I'm like, he can't be her main love interest. This is not Star Wars here. You know, where Luke and Leia had this thing until they realized that they were brother and sister, and then she moved on to Han Solo. This is not Star Wars. Like, we're at the end of the trilogy. We can't establish a new love interest. And we've been so vested in a love interest that we can't just say, oh no, we're not gonna have a love interest. And so Gier kind of writes it off as, well, I am a de Villiers, but I'm far removed, because the guy that he is or was staying with, his Uncle Falk, is Paul's brother. So to think that Gideon is descended from Gwen's uncle, you're like, that's a little too close to incest for me. Or at least it is for me, maybe not for you. I don't know where you live. So I liked that these guys turned out to be her parents, but I did get bothered with the whole explanation of how she and Gideon could still be together. There's no way around it, honestly, because all the time-traveling males come from the de Villiers line, and then all the time-traveling females come from Gwen's line, the female line. And so, like, you can't set up a story like that and then have Paul and Lucy fall in love only for Gwen and Gideon not to be able to fall in love. But I thought that, I guess maybe if it had been set up sooner, that he is not that closely related to Paul, that he is a far-reaching branch. There are lineage maps in the books. There's one in here, but it doesn't actually show Gideon's lineage. So I think it's in Ruby Red, which obviously, since I haven't actually physically read the books, I don't even know where to start with it. But yeah, I was a little bothered because it was like, Gier, she had to have known. I mean, from the very beginning, from Ruby Red when she was writing it, she had to know this was going to be a problem. But it felt like she got to Emerald Green and was like, how do I deal with this problem? Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm like a 14th cousin, you know, and it just wasn't enough for me. So yes, Emerald Green, I know I talked a lot about the things that bothered me, but it was a great book. It's a great trilogy, really fun. I enjoy Gwen. She's a breath of fresh air because she is a teenager. She's a true teenager being thrown into situations she's underprepared for, and she just handles them in a way that I would have handled them. I'm like, I'm doing the best I can, but like my interest doesn't really lie in the areas that I need to survive. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you didn't, that happens. Just be kind. Yeah, and as always, do the things I forget to tell you. Like, comment, subscribe, let people know I'm here. Bye.